I walked into the mahogany-paneled conference room of our family compound, wearing my simple cotton dress and worn flats, clutching my teacher's bag against my chest. The late afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating the faces of my relatives seated around the polished table. My cousin Jessica glanced at my outfit and whispered something to her brother Brandon, both snickering behind manicured hands. Uncle Robert stood at the head of the table, adjusting his silk tie as he announced they were selling our ancestral property to developers for $22 million, dividing proceeds among only the successful family members. Cousin Amanda's voice cut through the room like glass. Poor Lori can't even afford a house down payment. Cruel laughter erupted around me as they calculated my exclusion from the inheritance, their greed painting satisfied smirks across their faces. I remained silent, my fingers tightening around the manila envelope hidden in my bag. The memory flooded back as I watched their gleeful faces counting money they didn't yet possess. 6 months earlier, I had spent countless evenings in this same house, but in the smaller upstairs bedroom where my grandmother Dorothy lay dying. While my relatives attended charity galas and business dinners, I held her frail hand and listened to stories of our family's past. The oxygen tank hummed quietly in the corner as she told me how disgusted she felt watching her children and grandchildren transform into materialistic strangers. "They've forgotten what truly matters," she had whispered one cold February night, her voice barely audible above the winter wind rattling the windows. "Money has poisoned their hearts." That night, she pressed a small brass key into my palm, her fingers trembling with effort. "Safety deposit box at First National Bank." She said, her eyes intense despite her weakening body. "The family doesn't deserve what they think they're inheriting." Now, watching Uncle Robert spread falsified ownership documents across the conference table, I understood her meaning completely. Robert's booming voice filled the room as he explained how he had masterfully managed the family estate for decades. Jessica leaned back in her leather chair, diamond bracelet catching the light as she boasted about her luxury car dealership's record profits. The German sedans and Italian sports cars practically sold themselves to wealthy clients, she claimed, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "My cryptocurrency portfolio has tripled this year," Marcus added from across the table, his smartphone displaying colorful charts of digital investments. "Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin. I've got positions in everything that matters." The others nodded approvingly while calculating their anticipated inheritance shares on expensive tablets. According to their math, I deserved exactly $0 for my contribution to the family legacy. They conveniently ignored the fact that I had been the only one caring for our dying matriarch while they pursued their profitable ventures. Lori never invested in anything worthwhile. Patricia sneered, Uncle Robert's wife, adjusting her pearl necklace with practiced superiority. "Teaching elementary school children hardly builds family wealth." Their collective laughter stung, but I remembered Grandmother Dorothy's final words about protecting our family's true values. She had seen through their facade of success to the hollow greed beneath. The brass key felt warm in my pocket, a secret promise waiting to be fulfilled. Uncle Robert cleared his throat importantly, demanding attention as he prepared to reveal their carefully orchestrated plan. They had already contacted developers, negotiated prices, and divided profits among themselves. My exclusion wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate decision made months ago in private meetings I was never invited to attend. "The paperwork is straightforward," Robert announced, his pen poised over signature lines. "Once everyone signs, we'll be millionaires by Christmas." As I sat listening to their financial celebrations, a disturbing pattern began crystallizing in my mind. Over the past 3 years, my teaching career had faced mysterious obstacles that never quite made sense. Applications for department head positions were inexplicably withdrawn. Transfer requests to higher-paying districts disappeared from administrative files. Stellar performance reviews somehow vanished before promotion committees could review them. My cousin Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my gaze as the realization dawned. He worked in the school district's central administration office with access to personnel files and hiring decisions. The pieces fell into place like a cruel puzzle I had been too trusting to solve. "Derek," I said quietly, my voice cutting through their financial discussions, "how many of my job applications did you intercept?" The room fell silent tension, crackling like electricity before a storm. Derek's face flushed red as he stammered denials, but Patricia's satisfied smirk revealed the truth. "Look, someone had to teach you humility," Patricia said, her voice cold as winter rain. "We couldn't have you getting ideas above your station." The confessions tumbled out like poison from an infected wound. Patricia had spent years spreading carefully crafted rumors about my supposed instability to potential employers. She described elaborate phone calls to school principals suggesting I was unreliable and emotionally unstable. Her voice carried no shame, only pride in her systematic destruction of my professional reputation. "I convinced Principal Johnson at Riverside Elementary that you were having personal problems," Amanda added with a satisfied smile. "He was so concerned about hiring someone with mental health issues." They recounted their sabotage like war stories, each revelation more shocking than the last. Derek had altered my employment records to include false disciplinary actions. Jessica had used her business connections to badmouth me to school board members. Marcus had created fake social media profiles to post negative comments about my teaching abilities. "You needed to learn your place in this family," Uncle Robert declared, his voice booming with righteous authority. "Success requires knowing where you belong." Their systematic campaign had kept me financially dependent and powerless, exactly as they intended. Every application rejected, every interview that went nowhere, every promotion denied had been orchestrated by my own blood relatives. They justified their cruelty as necessary education, claiming I needed to understand my inferior position in their social hierarchy. The weight of their betrayal pressed down on me like a physical force, but something else stirred beneath the pain. My grandmother's words echoed in my memory, her fierce determination to protect what truly mattered. They thought they had broken my spirit, but they had only revealed their own moral bankruptcy. 3 years, I whispered more to myself than to them. 3 years of sabotage. And it worked perfectly. Jessica laughed, her voice sharp as breaking glass. "Look at you now, still wearing clothes from Target while we drive cars worth more than your annual salary." The conference room doors swung open as if summoned by their greed, admitting a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit. Christopher Walsh carried himself with the confident swagger of someone accustomed to closing million-dollar deals. His leather briefcase gleamed under the chandelier light as he approached our table with measured steps. "Good afternoon, everyone," Walsh said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "I trust you're ready to make some serious money today." Uncle Robert practically beamed as he gestured toward an empty chair positioned at the table's strategic center. Walsh opened his briefcase with theatrical precision, revealing neatly organized contracts and glossy development proposals. The documents featured computer-generated images of gleaming condominium towers rising from our family's waterfront property. $22 million, Walsh announced, his pen clicking with authority, for one of the most desirable pieces of coastal real estate in the county. The family leaned forward eagerly, their eyes reflecting dollar signs like slot machine wheels. Jessica's fingers drummed against the mahogany surface, while Marcus pulled out his phone to calculate percentage shares. Amanda whispered excitedly to Derek about vacation plans and luxury purchases. Walsh spread architectural renderings across the table, describing luxury amenities that would attract wealthy buyers from across the region. private marina access, infinity pools, concierge services, and panoramic ocean views would make these condominiums irresistible to affluent professionals seeking coastal retreats. The timing couldn't be more perfect. Walsh continued, his confidence radiating like summer heat. Coastal development is experiencing unprecedented demand. But something felt wrong. Walsh's hands trembled slightly as he arranged the papers, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's comfortable temperature. His eyes darted toward the windows overlooking the property, then quickly away as if avoiding something he didn't want to see. I excused myself quietly, claiming I needed to use the restroom. The hallway outside the conference room amplified every sound, including Walsh's urgent phone conversation filtering through the partially open door to Uncle Robert's private office. "See, 68 million, Walsh whispered harshly into his phone. "The zoning changes went through last week, and the marina development is approved. These people have no idea what they're sitting on." My blood turned to ice water as the implications crystallized. Walsh wasn't just buying our property, he was stealing it through deliberate deception. The recent zoning changes had transformed our coastal acreage from residential to mixed-use commercial, tripling its development potential overnight. "Robert's been feeding me information for months." Walsh continued, his voice dropping even lower. "He thinks he's getting a fair deal, but he's leaving $46 million on the table." Through the office's partially open door, I could see Walsh pacing behind Robert's desk like a caged predator. Maps covered the desktop marked with red circles indicating properties already acquired for the massive development project. Our family compound occupied the crucial centerpiece, the keystone that would unlock the entire plan. "The marina construction starts in 18 months, Walsh said into his phone. "Once that's operational, these condos will sell for 3 times the normal rate." I crept closer to hear more, my heart pounding like thunder in my chest. Walsh was discussing infrastructure investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars, federal tax incentives for coastal development, and partnership agreements with major hotel chains. Our property wasn't just valuable, it was the linchpin for transforming the entire coastline into a luxury resort destination. "Tell the investors everything's on schedule," Walsh concluded. "The marks are signing today." When I returned to the conference room, Walsh had regained his composure, but his nervous energy remained palpable. Uncle Robert was already reviewing signature pages, while the rest of the family calculated their windfall profits. They had no idea they were being cheated out of more than twice their agreed price. Brandon pulled out his phone to show Amanda luxury cars he planned to purchase with his inheritance share. "Ferrari, Lamborghini, maybe a classic Porsche," he said, scrolling through automotive websites with boyish excitement. "I'm thinking about that beach house in the Hamptons." Jessica added, her voice dreamy with anticipation. "The one with the private dock and infinity pool." They had already spent money they hadn't received based on a lie they were too greedy to question. Walsh's deception was working perfectly, aided by their own avarice and Uncle Robert's secret cooperation. As Walsh prepared the final documents, I realized this betrayal ran deeper than simple business fraud. Robert had been secretly negotiating with Walsh for months, positioning himself as the family's financial manager while planning to pocket the difference between the real value and the contracted price. His own relatives trusted him completely, never suspecting their beloved uncle was engineering their systematic robbery. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the coastline, I drove through empty streets to First National Bank. The brass key felt heavy in my palm as I approached the safety deposit box vault, my grandmother's final gift waiting to reveal its secrets. The bank's sterile fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across the tile floor as I followed the security guard through multiple locked doors. Box number 412 sat in the vault's deepest section, its metal surface unmarked by time or wear. When I turned the brass key, the mechanism clicked with satisfying precision, revealing a treasure trove more valuable than gold or diamonds. Legal documents, financial records, and handwritten notes filled the narrow space, each piece carefully organized and dated in my grandmother's precise handwriting. The original property deed lay on top, its official seals and signatures clearly authentic. Dorothy Margaret Westbrook, my grandmother's full legal name, appeared as the sole owner of not just our family compound, but additional properties I never knew existed. The deed transfer document bore yesterday's date, signed and notarized just weeks before her death. Beneath the deed lay bank statements spanning 15 years, each one meticulously annotated in Dorothy's careful script. Her notes revealed a pattern of financial irregularities that made my stomach clench with recognition. Uncle Robert had been systematically stealing from the family trust through a sophisticated network of fraudulent charges and inflated expenses. Consulting fees to RW Financial Services, read one annotation. Robert's company, no services provided. Another note detailed maintenance costs that seemed impossibly high. Pool cleaning $8,000 monthly, actual cost $400, Robert pocketing $7,600. The theft went back decades, each year showing increasingly bold embezzlement as Robert grew confident in his control over family finances. Landscaping bills, security services, property management fees, insurance premiums, and utilities had all been inflated to generate illegal profits funneled directly into Robert's personal accounts. But the most shocking discovery lay in a manila folder marked Atlantic City Receipts. Casino gambling losses totaled over $2 million across the past 5 years alone. Robert had been using stolen trust fund money to finance increasingly desperate betting at Borgata Caesars and Trump Taj Mahal. The receipts painted a picture of addiction spiraling completely out of control. Dorothy's handwritten timeline documented Robert's threats against family members who questioned his financial management. When cousin Michael had asked about trust fund performance 3 years ago, Robert had threatened to exclude him from all inheritance distributions. When Jessica's ex-husband had requested financial transparency during their divorce proceedings, Robert had somehow managed to have him fired from his corporate job. "He rules through fear and greed," Dorothy had written in purple ink. "They're all too comfortable to ask hard questions." A sealed envelope contained even more damning evidence, forged signatures on trust fund modifications that had transferred management authority exclusively to Robert. The original trust documents signed by my grandfather in 1972 had included multiple oversight requirements and spending limitations. Robert's forged modifications removed all restrictions, giving him unlimited access to family assets. The final document in the safety deposit box was a letter addressed to me personally, dated just 2 weeks before Dorothy's death. Her handwriting, though shakier than usual, carried unmistakable determination. "Dearest Lori, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about Robert's criminal activities have proven correct. I spent the last 2 years of my life gathering evidence of his theft, but I knew he would destroy everything if I confronted him directly. The deed transfer makes you the legal owner of all family properties, giving you the power to seek justice for his crimes. Use this evidence wisely, but remember that money corrupts even good people. Your true inheritance is the responsibility to protect our family's values from those who would destroy them for profit. Trust no one completely, but never let cynicism replace compassion. The choice between greed and goodness will define your character more than any amount of wealth ever could." As I sat in that sterile bank vault, surrounded by evidence of systematic betrayal by my own uncle, I felt the weight of Dorothy's trust settling on my shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. She had chosen me not because I was family, but because I had remained uncorrupted by the wealth that had poisoned the others. The storm outside, intensified rain lashing against the bank's windows as I carefully returned each document to its protective folder. Robert's gambling addiction had made him desperate enough to steal from his own family, while his position as trust manager had given him unlimited opportunity. The property sale to Walsh wasn't just about making money, it was about covering up years of embezzlement before anyone discovered the missing funds. Tomorrow would bring the final family meeting where contracts would be signed and Robert's crimes would be complete. But tonight, armed with Dorothy's evidence and legal ownership of the properties, I held the power to expose their greed and seek justice for decades of betrayal. The brass key felt different in my palm as I locked the safety deposit box, heavier somehow with the weight of truth and responsibility. Dorothy had given me the tools to fight back, but the choice of how to use them remained mine alone. The next morning brought deceptively peaceful sunshine as I drove across town to the law offices of Brennan Associates. Thomas Brennan had managed our family's legal affairs for over 20 years, his reputation built on discretion and unwavering loyalty to wealthy clients. The building's brick facade and ivy-covered walls projected old money respectability, exactly the image that had originally attracted my grandfather's business. Brennan's secretary, Margaret Collins, greeted me with the same warm smile she had offered for 3 decades of family visits. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her navy suit spoke of professional competence earned through years of dedicated service. She ushered me into Brennan's oak-paneled office, where leather-bound law books lined floor-to-ceiling shelves like silent witnesses to countless legal proceedings. "Lori, my dear," Brennan said, rising from behind his massive mahogany desk. His silver mustache and expensive suit commanded respect, while his gentle voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to resolving family disputes. "I understand you have some concerns about the estate proceedings." I spread Dorothy's documents across his conference table, explaining my grandmother's deed transfer and the evidence of Robert's embezzlement. Brennan's expression shifted dramatically as he examined the papers, his professional composure cracking like ice under pressure. "I'm afraid your grandmother was quite ill toward the end," he said, his voice suddenly cold and clinical. Mental deterioration often affects elderly clients' judgment regarding financial matters. The transformation was startling. The kindly family lawyer disappeared, replaced by someone calculating and hostile. Brennan claimed Dorothy had been suffering from dementia when she signed the deed transfer, making the document legally invalid. He threatened to file court papers declaring me mentally incompetent if I continued pursuing ownership claims. "Your family is concerned about your emotional stability." Brennan continued his words, cutting like surgical instruments. "Perhaps some professional counseling would help you process these delusions about property ownership." The meeting ended abruptly when Brennan dismissed my concerns and threatened legal action against me for interfering with legitimate estate proceedings. But as I walked toward the parking garage, feeling defeated and confused, Margaret Collins appeared beside my car like a guardian angel materializing from shadows. "Meet me at Riverside Park in 1 hour," she whispered urgently, glancing around the empty garage with practiced caution. "There are things you need to know about Mr. Brennan and your uncle." The park's walking trails provided perfect cover for clandestine conversations, hidden among oak trees and meandering streams where private words couldn't be overheard or recorded. Margaret led me to a secluded bench overlooking the duck pond, her usual professional demeanor replaced by nervous energy. "Your grandmother was sharp as a steel trap until the day she died." Margaret began, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "Mr. Brennan has been lying about her mental state to protect his own criminal activities." The revelations poured out like water through a broken dam. Brennan and Uncle Robert had been partners in systematically looting trust funds from multiple wealthy families for over a decade. They would identify elderly clients with substantial assets, gradually assume control of their financial affairs, then siphon money through fraudulent investments and inflated legal fees. They've stolen millions of dollars from at least 12 different families. Margaret continued producing a manila envelope from her purse. I've been documenting everything for years, waiting for the right moment to expose them. Inside the envelope were photocopied bank statements, recorded phone conversations, and detailed notes chronicling the conspiracy. Brennan had been creating fake investment accounts and charging enormous legal fees for non-existent services. Robert provided inside information about family assets, while Brennan handled the legal framework necessary to steal without detection. Your grandmother discovered their scheme 2 years ago, Margaret explained, tears forming in her eyes. She came to me because she knew Brennan would destroy her if she confronted him directly. Dorothy had been secretly working with Margaret to gather evidence using their decades-long relationship to access files and records that would normally be confidential. They had documented forged signatures, fraudulent trust modifications, and illegal fund transfers that painted a clear picture of systematic elder abuse. Mr. Brennan plans to have you declared mentally incompetent within the next 72 hours. Margaret warned, her voice urgent with concern. He's already contacted Dr. Franklin Pierce at Pine Ridge Psychiatric Hospital. The conspiracy extended deeper than simple financial fraud. If Dorothy's deed transfer became public knowledge, threatening their control over family assets, they had arranged to have me institutionalized for claiming ownership of property, supposedly beyond my means. Dr. Pierce, who owed Brennan substantial legal fees, had agreed to falsify psychiatric evaluations, declaring me delusional and dangerous. Margaret handed me a small digital recorder containing hours of conversations between Brennan and Robert discussing their plans. Their voices, captured through her careful surveillance, revealed the cold calculation behind their friendly facades. "We can't let her interfere with the property sale." Robert's voice crackled through the device. "Franklin owes us enough favors to keep her locked up for months. The family will never question a psychiatric commitment," Brennan's voice replied with chilling matter-of-factness, "especially after we plant evidence of her supposed mental breakdown." As Margaret and I sat beside that peaceful duck pond listening to my own family plot my destruction, I felt the last vestiges of naive trust crumble away. These weren't just greedy relatives making poor financial decisions. They were calculating criminals willing to destroy my life to protect their stolen wealth. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," Margaret said, pressing another envelope into my hands. She recorded a video message explaining everything, just in case something happened to her before she could expose them herself. The weight of Dorothy's trust and Margaret's courage filled me with determination stronger than any fear. They thought they could intimidate me into silence, but they had underestimated the power of truth backed by carefully gathered evidence. That evening, I sat in my small apartment watching Dorothy's final video message on my laptop screen. Despite her physical frailty, her eyes burned with fierce intelligence as she explained the full scope of the conspiracy against our family. "They think I'm a foolish old woman who doesn't understand modern finance," Dorothy said, her voice steady despite the oxygen tank visible in the background. "But I've been watching them steal from us for years, waiting for the right moment to strike back." The video revealed details that made my blood run cold. The family's plan to institutionalize me wasn't just about preventing inheritance claims. It was about eliminating the only witness to their crimes. Dr. Franklin Pierce ran a private psychiatric facility known for keeping wealthy patients indefinitely when their families requested extended treatment for difficult relatives. Jessica's husband works as an orderly at Pine Ridge. Dorothy continued her revelation, hitting like a physical blow. He's already prepared falsified medical records showing a pattern of delusional behavior regarding property ownership. The conspiracy involved nearly everyone I had once trusted. Jessica and her husband had been documenting my conversations for months, secretly recording phone calls and visits to build a case for mental instability. They planned to claim I had been having episodes where I believed I owned properties far beyond my financial means. Margaret had provided additional evidence showing how the family had been laying groundwork for my commitment. Uncle Robert had been telling neighbors and family friends that I had been acting strangely since Dorothy's death, obsessing over inheritance money and making unrealistic claims about property ownership. Poor Lori has been struggling since Mother passed. Robert's voice played through Margaret's recordings. She keeps insisting Dorothy left her everything, but of course that's impossible given her financial situation. Patricia had been spreading similar stories among church members and social clubs, describing my supposed deteriorating mental state with false concern. She claimed I had been making threatening phone calls to family members and showing up at their homes uninvited, demanding money I wasn't entitled to receive. The most chilling revelation came from a conversation between Jessica and Dr. Pierce discussing how to maintain my commitment indefinitely. Pierce explained that wealthy families often found it convenient to have troublesome relatives declared incompetent, allowing them to control inheritance distributions without interference. "We can keep her sedated for months," Pierce's voice said through the recording device. "By the time she's coherent enough to challenge the diagnosis, the property sale will be complete and the money distributed." They had planned every detail with methodical precision. Once I was committed, Robert would assume power of attorney over my affairs, giving him legal authority to sign away any property claims on my behalf. The deed transfer from Dorothy would be declared invalid due to my supposed mental incapacity, returning control of all family assets to Robert's management. "The beauty of the plan is that she'll discredit herself," Brennan's voice added with cold satisfaction. "The more she insists she owns the property, the more delusional she'll appear." As I listened to my own family plot my destruction, I understood why Dorothy had chosen such elaborate secrecy to protect the evidence. These weren't just greedy relatives. They were calculating predators who viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle to their continued theft. But Dorothy's video contained one final surprise that changed everything. She had been secretly working with federal investigators for over a year, providing evidence of Brennan's systematic elder abuse affecting dozens of wealthy families across 3 states. The FBI had been building a comprehensive case waiting for the right moment to strike. Agent Sarah Rodriguez of the FBI's Economic Crimes Division has all the evidence. Dorothy explained, her voice carrying quiet triumph. "I've been working as an informant, gathering proof of their criminal enterprise." The property sale to Christopher Walsh was actually part of a federal sting operation designed to catch the conspirators in the act of completing their largest fraud. Walsh himself was cooperating with authorities using the fake development deal to record Robert and Brennan's admissions of guilt. "By the time you see this video, the investigation will be nearly complete," Dorothy continued. "All you need to do is stay safe and let justice take its course." But staying safe seemed impossible when my own family was actively working to have me imprisoned in a psychiatric facility. Dr. Pierce was expecting me to be brought in within 48 hours, and Jessica's husband had already prepared the falsified records that would justify indefinite commitment. Dorothy's final words carried both warning and hope. "They underestimated you just as they underestimated me. But remember that justice without compassion becomes revenge, and revenge poisons the soul just as surely as greed. When this is over, you'll have the power to choose between punishment and redemption. Choose wisely." As the video ended, I realized Dorothy's greatest gift wasn't the property deed or the evidence of crimes, but the opportunity to prove that our family's values could survive the corruption that had infected the others. The choice between justice and revenge would define not just my character, but the future of our family legacy. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to my apartment. I was reviewing Dorothy's evidence when urgent knocking interrupted my concentration. Through the peephole, I saw two professional-looking women carrying official identification badges and briefcases that suggested federal authority. Agent Sarah Rodriguez matched Dorothy's description perfectly: mid-40s, sharp eyes, and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to investigating complex financial crimes. Her partner, Agent Jennifer Walsh, carried herself with similar professional competence, their coordinated appearance suggesting extensive experience working together. "Miss Westbrook," Agent Rodriguez said, displaying her FBI credentials with practiced efficiency, "we've been expecting your contact since your grandmother's death. She provided crucial assistance to our investigation." The agents explained that Dorothy had been working as a confidential informant for over 18 months, providing evidence of systematic elder abuse orchestrated by Brennan's law firm and Uncle Robert's financial management company. Their investigation had expanded far beyond my family's situation to encompass dozens of wealthy families victimized by the same criminal network. "Your uncle and Brennan are just middle management in a much larger operation," Agent Walsh explained, spreading photographs across my kitchen table. "Christopher Walsh, the developer who's buying your family property, represents something far more sinister than simple real estate fraud." The photographs showed satellite images of coastal properties from Maryland to South Carolina, each marked with red indicators showing industrial facilities disguised as luxury developments. Walsh's development company was actually a subsidiary of Titan Industries, a corporation with extensive connections to chemical manufacturing and waste disposal operations. "Titan specializes in environmental destruction for profit," Rodriguez continued, her voice carrying barely contained anger. "They've been systematically acquiring coastal properties to establish illegal waste dumping sites. The luxury condominiums Walsh had promised were complete fabrications. Titan's real plan involved constructing chemical waste storage facilities and industrial processing plants that would dump toxic materials directly into the ocean through underground pipeline systems. The marina development was actually a cover for tanker ships delivering hazardous waste from chemical manufacturers across the eastern United States. Your family compound occupies the crucial central location," Agent Walsh explained, pointing to detailed maps showing Titan's acquisitions. "Without that property, their entire dumping operation collapses." The agents showed me environmental impact studies that Titan had commissioned privately, revealing their full awareness of the ecological devastation their operations would cause. Marine life would be poisoned for decades, groundwater contaminated permanently, and local fishing industries destroyed completely. The environmental damage would affect millions of people living along the coastline. "Titan has been working through shell companies and corrupt local officials to bypass environmental protection laws," Rodriguez added. "They've already bribed county commissioners and state environmental regulators to approve their permits." Dorothy's involvement in environmental protection organizations had attracted Titan's attention, making her a target for their systematic campaign to acquire her property. When she refused initial offers to sell, they had approached Uncle Robert with a more sophisticated scheme involving legal fraud and family manipulation. Robert's gambling debts made him an easy target for recruitment. Agent Walsh explained, showing bank records documenting payments from Titan subsidiaries to Robert's personal accounts. They've been funding his casino losses in exchange for inside information about family assets. The conspiracy extended deeper than anyone had imagined. Brennan's law firm had been handling property acquisitions for Titan across multiple states, using elder abuse and estate fraud to steal land from families who refused to sell. Their systematic approach had netted Titan over 50,000 acres of prime coastal property at fraction of its legitimate value. Your grandmother discovered their environmental plans through her conservation work. Rodriguez continued, admiration clear in her voice. She realized that saving your family's money wasn't enough. She had to protect the entire ecosystem from Titan's destruction. Dorothy's deed transfer hadn't just been about inheritance rights or family justice. It had been about preventing environmental catastrophe that would affect millions of people. Her decision to work with federal investigators reflected her understanding that some battles required more than family resources to win. Oh, the property sale meeting tomorrow is our chance to catch everyone involved. Agent Walsh explained, outlining the sting operation they had planned. Walsh will be wearing recording equipment and will have surveillance teams positioned around the compound. But the agent's most shocking revelation concerned the scope of Titan's political corruption. They had been systematically bribing elected officials at every level of government, from local zoning boards to federal environmental regulators. The conspiracy included senators, congressional representatives, and cabinet-level officials who had been paid to ignore environmental violations and approve illegal permits. This investigation could bring down one of the largest environmental crime syndicates in American history. Rodriguez said, her voice carrying the weight of responsibility. Your grandmother's evidence and courage made it all possible. As the agents prepared to leave, they provided me with emergency contact numbers and safety protocols for the next 48 hours. Titan's executives had been known to use violence when their operations were threatened, and my knowledge of their plans made me a potential target for intimidation or worse. God, stay visible and stay public, Agent Walsh advised. Don't go anywhere alone and don't trust anyone except us until this operation is complete. The weight of Dorothy's true legacy settled on my shoulders like a mantle of responsibility far heavier than simple inheritance rights. She hadn't just saved our family's wealth. She had positioned us to save the environment itself from systematic destruction. The choice between greed and environmental protection would determine not just our family's future, but the future of the entire coastline. Later that afternoon, following Agent Rodriguez's instructions, I drove to the Coastal Conservation Center, located in a converted warehouse near the harbor. The building's solar panels and wind turbines immediately indicated its environmental mission, while native plant gardens surrounding the entrance demonstrated practical commitment to ecological restoration. Dr. Sarah Mitchell greeted me at the reception desk, her warm smile and earth-tone clothing reflecting the passionate dedication that had made her a respected leader in environmental protection circles. Her office walls displayed photographs of pristine coastlines, endangered wildlife, and successful conservation projects that testified to decades of effective advocacy. Dorothy spoke of you often during our planning sessions, Dr. Mitchell said, gesturing toward comfortable chairs arranged near windows overlooking the harbor. She was incredibly proud of your teaching work and your genuine care for children's futures. The revelation that Dorothy had been actively collaborating with environmental organizations surprised me less than it should have. Her lifelong love of nature and growing concern about industrial pollution had apparently evolved into sophisticated activism involving legal strategies and political advocacy. Your grandmother contacted us 2 years ago when she first discovered Titan's plans. Dr. Mitchell explained, pulling out files thick with documentation. She understood immediately that this wasn't just about your family's property, but about protecting the entire coastal ecosystem. Marine biologist Professor David Chen joined our conversation, bringing underwater photographs that dramatically illustrated the environmental stakes involved. His research had documented declining fish populations, coral reef degradation, and water quality deterioration directly linked to industrial pollution from facilities similar to what Titan planned to construct. The chemical waste dumping would destroy marine life for at least 50 years. Professor Chen explained, his voice heavy with scientific authority. Everything from microscopic plankton to large fish species would be poisoned by the toxic runoff. Dorothy's collaboration with these scientists had been more extensive than I could have imagined. She had funded research studies, provided access to family property for environmental monitoring, and worked with legal experts to establish conservation protections that would make Titan's development impossible. We've been preparing conservation easements that would permanently protect your family's property from industrial development. Dr. Mitchell continued spreading legal documents across her desk. Dorothy wanted to ensure that future generations would inherit clean water and healthy ecosystems. The conservation easements represented Dorothy's most far-sighted planning. By donating development rights to qualified environmental organizations, she had created legal barriers that would survive any attempt by family members to sell the property for industrial purposes. The documents required unanimous agreement from all easement holders before any development could proceed. Titan's lawyers don't know about these easements, Professor Chen added with satisfaction. They've been assuming they could override local environmental protections through political corruption and legal manipulation. But Dorothy's environmental strategy extended far beyond legal documents. She had been secretly funding a network of scientific researchers, legal advocates, and political activists working to expose Titan's operations across multiple states. Her financial support had enabled investigations that were now providing evidence to federal prosecutors. The conservation movement owes your grandmother an enormous debt, Dr. Mitchell said, emotion clear in her voice. Her courage and resources have made it possible to challenge one of the most destructive corporations in America. The environmental alliance Dorothy had built included universities, advocacy organizations, tribal governments, and fishing communities that would all be affected by Titan's operations. Their coordinated resistance had been carefully planned to activate simultaneously when the federal investigation became public. Tomorrow's property sale meeting will trigger environmental protests, legal challenges, and media coverage that Titan never anticipated. Professor Chen explained, outlining a comprehensive strategy for maximum public impact. Your grandmother planned every detail to ensure maximum protection for the coastline. As afternoon sunlight streamed through Dr. Mitchell's office windows, I began to understand the true scope of Dorothy's legacy. She hadn't just protected our family's financial interests, she had positioned us to lead a movement for environmental justice that could influence policy and corporate behavior for decades to come. Your decision about the property's future will determine whether this coastline remains healthy for your students, children, and grandchildren. Dr. Mitchell said, her words carrying the weight of generational responsibility. Dorothy trusted you to make the right choice when the time came. The Environmental Alliance had provided Dorothy with something our family couldn't offer: a sense of purpose larger than personal wealth or individual success. Her collaboration with scientists and activists had given meaning to her final years that no amount of money could have purchased. She often said that protecting the environment was the most important inheritance she could leave. Professor Chen added, packing away his research photographs. Money can be spent and forgotten, but a healthy ecosystem benefits everyone forever. As I prepared to leave the Conservation Center, Dr. Mitchell handed me a final folder containing Dorothy's environmental research and correspondence with scientific experts around the world. Her grandmother's commitment to learning and growth, even in her 80s, demonstrated the intellectual curiosity that had made her such an effective activist. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that your grandmother's work will continue, Dr. Mitchell assured me, her handshake carrying the strength of shared commitment. The movement she helped build is larger than any one family or property. The next morning brought ominous gray clouds and an unexpected interruption to our family meeting. We had barely settled around the conference table when the compound's front door burst open with jarring violence. 3 men in expensive suits entered without invitation, their presence radiating menace despite their professional appearance. Vincent Calabrese led the group with the confident stride of someone accustomed to intimidating wealthy people into compliance. His silver hair and tailored clothing couldn't disguise the predatory calculation in his eyes, while his companions flanked him like well-dressed bodyguards prepared for violence. "Robert E." Vincent said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of absolute power. "We need to discuss your outstanding obligations." The color drained from Uncle Robert's face as he recognized the implications of their arrival. His gambling debts had apparently reached the point where loan sharks were willing to confront him publicly, regardless of his family's social standing or the property sale negotiations in progress. $2,400,000. Vincent continued, pulling out a leather portfolio and spreading documents across our conference table. Plus accumulated interest and collection fees, of course. The family sat in stunned silence as Vincent detailed Robert's extensive borrowing from organizations that operated outside traditional banking regulations. Casino debts at Borgata Caesar's Palace and Trump Taj Mahal had been consolidated into high-interest loans secured by promises of family property sales. "Your uncle has been using all of your names as collateral for additional borrowing," Vincent explained, his matter-of-fact tone making the revelation even more terrifying. "Credit applications, loan guarantees, and investment partnerships have been signed using your personal information." Jessica discovered that her credit score had been destroyed by fraudulent accounts opened in her name to fund Robert's gambling activities. Marcus found that his business assets had been pledged as security for loans he knew nothing about. Derek learned that his home had been used as collateral for a loan shark operation based in Philadelphia. "How is this possible?" Amanda whispered, her voice trembling as she reviewed documents showing her signature on financial agreements she had never seen before. "Your uncle is quite skilled at document forgery," Vincent replied with professional appreciation. "He's been practicing for years on trust fund paperwork and estate documents." Christopher Walsh shifted nervously in his chair, realizing that the property sale he had orchestrated was actually intended to pay dangerous criminals rather than provide family inheritance. The $22 million purchase price would barely cover Robert's accumulated debts, leaving nothing for the family members who thought they were becoming millionaires. 72 hours. Vincent announced, checking an expensive watch with theatrical precision. "That's how long you have to produce our money before we implement alternative collection methods." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a poisonous fire. Vincent's organization didn't rely on legal procedures or bankruptcy courts to recover debts. They used intimidation, violence, and systematic destruction of their targets' lives until payment was received in full. "What happens if we can't pay?" Derek asked, though his pale complexion suggested he already suspected the answer. "We start with property seizure, business disruption, and public humiliation." Vincent explained, his voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. "Then, we progress to more personal methods of encouragement." Robert's criminal activities had exposed the entire family to danger they couldn't have imagined. The loan sharks had extensively researched every family member, identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited if necessary. They knew about Jessica's car dealership, Marcus's cryptocurrency investments, Derek's school district position, and Amanda's social media influence. "Your businesses, your careers, your reputations, and your physical safety are all at risk." Vincent continued, making notes in his leather portfolio. "We've found that comprehensive pressure produces the fastest results." Patricia began crying as she realized their comfortable lifestyle had been built on borrowed money from organizations that viewed murder as a routine business expense. The family's social connections and professional achievements meant nothing to creditors who operated by entirely different rules. "Please," Robert begged, his voice cracking under the weight of fear and desperation. "The property sale will close tomorrow and you'll have your money." "We'll verify that personally," Vincent replied, signaling his companions toward the conference room's windows overlooking the property. "Our associates will be monitoring the transaction to ensure proper distribution of proceeds." Christopher Walsh tried to maintain his professional composure, but sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized the federal investigation would prevent the property sale from proceeding as planned. The loan sharks expected their money within 72 hours, but the FBI sting operation would freeze all assets and arrest everyone involved. As Vincent and his associates prepared to leave, they provided Robert with detailed instructions for transferring the money once the sale closed. Wire transfer accounts, international banking procedures, and communication protocols were outlined with military precision, leaving no room for delays or complications. Remember that we have extensive information about all of your family members, Vincent said, his parting words carrying unmistakable menace. Disappointing us would be extremely unwise for everyone's health and safety. The conference room fell silent after their departure, the family finally understanding the true scope of Robert's betrayal. He hadn't just stolen their money, he had exposed them to life-threatening danger from criminals who would stop at nothing to collect their debts. "What have you done to us?" Jessica whispered, her voice breaking as the full implications crystallized. "We're all gonna die because of your gambling addiction." Robert slumped in his chair, the weight of his crimes finally crushing his facade of confident authority. The property sale that was supposed to make them all wealthy had actually been arranged to save his life at the cost of their family's destruction. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the coastline, promising another night of violent weather, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of waiting for the FBI sting operation to unfold, I contacted Janet Rodriguez, an independent property appraiser whose reputation for thorough investigation and absolute honesty had made her the preferred choice for high-stakes real estate disputes. Janet agreed to meet me at dawn, her professional curiosity piqued by my description of the property's complex ownership issues and the urgent timeline for accurate valuation. Her silver pickup truck arrived at the compound's gates. As morning mist still clung to the coastline, her surveying equipment and geological testing devices filling the vehicle's bed like tools of scientific discovery. "Oh, waterfront properties this size usually hide surprises," Janet said, her weathered hands adjusting sophisticated measurement instruments with practiced precision. Developers don't spend millions without conducting extensive geological surveys first. We walked the property's boundaries as sunrise painted the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, Janet's trained eyes cataloging features that escaped casual observation. She pointed out subtle elevation changes, unusual vegetation patterns, and rock formations that suggested geological complexity beneath the surface. "These limestone outcroppings are interesting," Janet observed, kneeling to examine exposed bedrock near the shoreline. "Coastal geology in this region typically shows different mineral compositions." Her portable X-ray fluorescence analyzer revealed mineral concentrations that made her stop working entirely, her professional composure cracking as she stared at the device's digital readout. Lithium deposits lay beneath our family compound in quantities that defied normal geological expectations. "This is extraordinary," Janet whispered, her voice filled with scientific excitement. "These lithium concentrations could support commercial mining operations for decades." The implications crystallize with stunning clarity. Electric vehicle battery manufacturing required enormous quantities of lithium-making mineral deposits, increasingly valuable as automotive companies transitioned away from fossil fuels. Technology corporations were desperately seeking domestic lithium sources to reduce dependence on foreign suppliers. Current market prices would value these deposits at approximately $50 million. Janet calculated cross-referencing mineral surveys with commodity futures markets, plus the underlying real estate value, plus development potential for luxury residential construction. But her geological analysis revealed even more shocking discoveries. The coastal property contained rare earth elements essential for semiconductor manufacturing, wind turbine construction, and advanced battery technologies. Companies like Tesla, Apple, and Samsung were paying premium prices for secure access to these strategic materials. The total mineral rights value could exceed $100 million. Janet concluded her appraisal equipment, confirming geological surveys that Titan Industries had obviously conducted secretly. Christopher Walsh knew exactly what he was buying when he offered $22 million for the surface rights alone. The pieces of Titan's deception fell into place like a puzzle revealing corporate fraud on an unprecedented scale. They weren't just planning chemical waste dumping, they intended to extract valuable minerals while disguising the operation as residential development. Their fake condominium proposal provided perfect cover for industrial mining that would generate billions in profits. Bioenvironmental groups would never approve mining permits if they understood the scope of extraction Titan is planning. Janet explained reviewing geological data that painted a picture of systematic resource theft. They're counting on family ignorance and legal fraud to steal mineral rights worth more than most people's entire net worth. Dorothy's environmental activism suddenly made even more sense. She hadn't just been protecting marine ecosystems from chemical pollution. She had been preventing the strip mining destruction that would devastate the coastline forever. Her conservation easements weren't just about preserving natural beauty, but protecting irreplaceable geological formations. "Your grandmother must have suspected the mineral deposits," Janet said, examining conservation documents with growing respect. "These legal protections are specifically designed to prevent subsurface exploitation." The independent appraisal revealed that our family compound represented one of the most valuable pieces of private property on the entire eastern seaboard. Between surface development, rights, mineral extraction potential, and strategic location for future infrastructure projects, the total value approached financial figures that seemed almost fictional. Titan's $22 million offer represents maybe 15% of the property's actual worth. Janet calculated, shaking her head at the magnitude of attempted theft. This level of corporate fraud could trigger federal racketeering charges. As we completed the geological survey, Janet's equipment detected underground water systems that connected our property to municipal drinking supplies serving over 200,000 residents. Titan's chemical dumping wouldn't just poison marine life, it would contaminate public water sources for generations. The environmental damage would cost billions to remediate. Janet warned, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed corporate environmental destruction firsthand. Some contamination might be permanent. Dorothy's decision to work with federal investigators reflected her understanding that protecting the property required more than family resources or local environmental groups could provide. The scale of Titan's planned destruction demanded federal intervention and criminal prosecution. "Your grandmother positioned your family to become environmental guardians for the entire region," Janet observed, packing away her surveying equipment as afternoon shadows lengthened across the property. "The mineral wealth gives you resources to fund conservation efforts indefinitely." The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a mantle heavier than any inheritance of simple money. Dorothy hadn't just left me property. She had entrusted me with geological resources that could either fund environmental protection or finance ecological destruction depending on the choices I made. The mineral rights alone could fund marine research, habitat restoration, and environmental education for decades. Janet suggested, her voice carrying hope for possibilities beyond simple profit. Sustainable extraction methods could generate wealth while protecting the ecosystem. As storm clouds gathered again over the coastline, promising another night of violent weather, I realized that tomorrow's family meeting would determine not just our personal financial future, but the environmental fate of the entire region. The choice between immediate profit and long-term stewardship would define our family's legacy for generations to come. The following morning brought crisp autumn air and a caravan of official vehicles that transformed our family compound into something resembling a military operation. Attorney Elizabeth Harper arrived first, her black sedan followed by FBI surveillance vans, media trucks, and squad cars that surrounded the property with precision timing that suggested extensive coordination. Elizabeth Harper commanded attention the moment she entered our conference room, her presence radiating the confident authority of someone who had spent decades fighting corporate fraud and elder abuse. Her silver briefcase contained legal documents that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in our family's ongoing financial war. "Why, ladies and gentlemen," Harper announced, her voice carrying courtroom authority that silenced all conversation immediately. "I represent Laurie Westbrook in criminal and civil proceedings against Robert Westbrook, Thomas Brennan, and their criminal associates." Uncle Robert's face turned ashen as Harper spread federal indictments, civil lawsuit documents, and asset seizure orders across the conference table. The legal papers contained detailed allegations of elder abuse, trust fund embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempting to unlawfully commit an individual to psychiatric care. The recordings obtained through confidential informant Dorothy Westbrook provide extensive evidence of systematic criminal enterprise. Harper continued activating a digital audio system that filled the room with damning conversations. Every admission, every threat, and every plan has been documented for federal prosecutors. Robert's voice echoed through expensive speakers discussing his gambling debts, his theft from family trust funds, and his plans to have me declared mentally incompetent. Brennan's voice followed detailing legal strategies for stealing client assets and bribing psychiatric professionals to falsify medical records. These recordings will be presented to federal grand juries investigating organized financial crimes affecting elderly victims across multiple states. Harper explained, her words landing like hammer blows against Robert's crumbling facade. Criminal prosecution will seek maximum sentences, including decades in federal prison. Jessica started crying as she heard her own voice discussing plans to sabotage my career and provide false testimony about my supposed mental instability. Marcus discovered that his cryptocurrency investments had been funded entirely by stolen trust money, making him potentially liable for receiving stolen property. Civil asset forfeiture will recover every dollar stolen from family trust funds. Harper continued producing bank records that documented the flow of embezzled money through various accounts. Luxury cars, homes, investments, and business assets purchased with stolen funds will be seized and sold to compensate victims. The legal counterattack extended far beyond financial recovery to include criminal charges that would destroy Robert and Brennan's carefully constructed reputations. Federal prosecutors were seeking racketeering convictions that carried 20-year minimum sentences, while state authorities were filing elder abuse charges that would ensure additional prison time. Dr. Franklin Pierce has already been arrested for conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. Harper announced producing arrest warrants that revealed the full scope of the psychiatric commitment plot. His cooperation with federal investigators has provided detailed evidence of your family's criminal conspiracy. Patricia sobbed as she realized her participation in spreading rumors about my mental health constituted criminal conspiracy to violate civil rights. Derek faced termination from his school district position and possible criminal charges for using his administrative access to sabotage my career opportunities. The State Bar Association has initiated disciplinary proceedings against Thomas Brennan. Harper continued reviewing professional misconduct charges that would result in permanent disbarment. His law license will be revoked, and he faces personal bankruptcy from civil liability judgments. But Harper's most devastating revelation concerned the family's financial future. Every asset purchased with stolen trust fund money faced immediate seizure, leaving most family members facing poverty after years of living beyond their legitimate means. Restitution requirements will exceed $5 million. Harper calculated reviewing financial records that documented the full extent of Robert's theft. Family members who knowingly benefited from stolen money face personal liability for the full amount of restitution plus punitive damages. Amanda's luxury lifestyle, funded entirely by Robert's embezzlement, would disappear overnight as federal agents seized her home cars and investment accounts. Brandon's business ventures, capitalized with stolen family money, faced immediate bankruptcy as assets were frozen and liquidated. While Lori Westbrook's status as the legitimate owner of all family properties gives her legal authority to pursue additional civil damages, Harper explained producing deed documents that established my complete control over assets the family thought they owned collectively. Rental income, property appreciation, and investment profits belong entirely to Miss Westbrook. The family realized they had been living rent-free in properties that belonged to me, their comfortable assumption of inherited wealth replaced by the harsh reality of potential homelessness. Years of mocking my financial situation had been based on their complete ignorance of actual ownership arrangements. Federal prosecutors are offering plea agreements in exchange for cooperation and full restitution. Harper announced, providing legal documents that outlined the terms for avoiding maximum sentences. Those who provide substantial assistance to ongoing investigations may receive reduced charges. Robert's gambling addiction and criminal associates had exposed the family to dangers they were only beginning to understand. Vincent Calabresi's Loan Shark organization was also under federal investigation, with Robert's cooperation potentially reducing his own sentence while helping prosecutors dismantle a criminal enterprise that had victimized hundreds of families. The choice is simple, Harper concluded, her voice carrying the finality of legal judgment: cooperation and restitution, or maximum sentences and complete financial destruction. As federal agents prepared to execute arrest warrants and asset seizure orders, the family faced the consequences of years spent prioritizing wealth over ethics. Their comfortable lives, built on stolen money and sustained through systematic cruelty, would be dismantled with the same methodical precision they had used to destroy my opportunities. The recordings continued playing their damning confessions as handcuffs clicked around Robert's wrists, the sound of justice finally arriving after decades of unchecked criminal behavior. As federal agents led Uncle Robert toward their waiting vehicles, Attorney Harper produced a final set of documents that would complete the family's understanding of their true financial situation. The leather portfolio she opened contained property deeds, survey maps, and ownership records that painted a picture of Dorothy's secret real estate empire spanning the entire coastal region. Dorothy Westbrook's property acquisitions extended far beyond the family compound. Harper announced, spreading detailed maps across the conference table. Over 30 years, she systematically purchased 12 additional properties surrounding this location. The revelation hit the family like a tsunami of financial reality. Every house where family members lived rent-free actually belonged to me through Dorothy's carefully orchestrated deed transfers. Jessica's waterfront mansion, Marcus's colonial estate, Derek's suburban home, and Amanda's downtown condominium were all part of a real estate portfolio worth over $40 million. The trust fund money that Robert stole was used legitimately by Dorothy to build a comprehensive land preservation strategy. Harper explained, pointing to property boundaries marked on aerial photographs. She understood that protecting the coastline required controlling enough acreage to prevent industrial development. Patricia's beach cottage, where she had hosted family gatherings for decades, sat on land Dorothy had purchased quietly through shell companies and conservation trusts. Brandon's lakefront retreat, which he considered his personal sanctuary, was legally owned by the environmental foundation Dorothy had established in my name. Every property deed includes environmental protection covenants that prevent industrial or commercial development. Harper continued reading legal language that would permanently preserve the natural character of the entire region. Dorothy's vision extended far beyond simple real estate investment to comprehensive ecosystem protection. The family sat in stunned silence as they realized the magnitude of their misunderstanding. While they had been fighting over anticipated inheritance from property, they thought they partially owned. Dorothy had been building an environmental legacy that made me the largest private landowner in the county. Current fair market value for the entire property portfolio approaches $60 million. Harper calculated, cross-referencing recent comparable sales with property tax assessments. The mineral rights discovered through geological surveys add another 40 to 50 million in potential value. Cousin Jessica's sobs echoed through the conference room as she understood that her luxury lifestyle had been entirely dependent on my generosity and Dorothy's environmental vision. The waterfront mansion, where she had entertained business clients and social acquaintances, belonged to the woman she had systematically mocked and sabotaged. Miss Westbrook has the legal authority to terminate all family occupancy arrangements immediately, Harper explained, reviewing tenancy laws that protected property owners' rights. 30 days' notice would be sufficient to require vacation of all premises. Marcus pulled out his phone to calculate rental costs for comparable properties, his face growing pale as he realized that fair market rent for his colonial estate would consume his entire legitimate income. Years of living beyond his means, subsidized by free housing, had left him financially unprepared for independent living. Alternatively, Miss Westbrook could establish fair market rental agreements for family members who demonstrate genuine rehabilitation and commitment to environmental stewardship. Harper suggested outlining possibilities for family reconciliation based on changed behavior and values. Derek wiped tears from his eyes as he contemplated losing the suburban home where his children had grown up, their neighborhood friends, and their school district connections. His sabotage of my career had endangered his own family's housing security through cosmic justice that felt almost biblical in its precision. The environmental foundation established by Dorothy includes provisions for employing family members in conservation work. Harper continued explaining opportunities for redemption through meaningful service. Salaries would be modest but sufficient for basic living expenses. Amanda stopped crying as she began to understand that Dorothy's legacy offered pathways to purposeful work rather than simply comfortable wealth. The environmental education programs planned for the property could provide employment for family members willing to abandon their materialistic values in favor of genuine service. Property management, educational programming, scientific research, and conservation advocacy all require dedicated staff members, Harper explained, outlining career opportunities that would allow family members to rebuild their lives around meaningful work. Dorothy's endowment provides funding for long-term employment in environmental protection. Patricia raised her hand tentatively, her voice barely audible as she asked about possibilities for remaining in the beach cottage where she had lived for 15 years. The humble tone represented a dramatic change from her usual commanding presence during family meetings. Housing arrangements will depend on demonstrated commitment to environmental values and genuine cooperation with conservation goals. Harper replied, her voice carrying both firmness and hope. Dorothy believed people could change if given proper motivation and opportunity. The transformation in family dynamics was immediate and profound. Relatives who had mocked my financial situation were now dependent on my generosity for basic housing. The power structure that had excluded me from inheritance decisions had been completely reversed through Dorothy's brilliant legal strategy. Miss Westbrook will make individual decisions about family housing and employment based on each person's willingness to embrace environmental stewardship as their primary life purpose. Harper concluded, closing the property portfolios with quiet authority. As the legal presentations ended, I realized that Dorothy had given me something far more valuable than money, the opportunity to choose between revenge and redemption for family members who had treated me cruelly. The power to forgive or punish would test my character more than any amount of wealth ever could. The coastal property around us represented not just financial assets, but responsibility for environmental protection that would outlast all of our individual lives. Dorothy's true legacy was the chance to build something meaningful from the wreckage of family greed and betrayal. The sound of additional vehicles arriving outside interrupted Harper's legal presentations, their synchronized timing suggesting the culmination of the federal investigation that had been building for over a year. Through the conference room's tall windows, I could see unmarked sedans, FBI tactical vehicles, and local police cars positioning themselves around the compound with military precision. Agent Sarah Rodriguez entered first, her badge displayed prominently as she was followed by a team of federal agents carrying arrest warrants and evidence collection equipment. The casual clothes and friendly demeanor she had shown during our previous meetings were replaced by professional law enforcement authority that commanded immediate attention. Robert Westbrook. Agent Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying the weight of federal justice. You are under arrest for elder abuse conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and racketeering in connection with organized criminal enterprise. The handcuffs clicked around Robert's wrists with metallic finality as Agent Walsh read his rights in the clear, measured tone required by federal procedures. His gambling addiction and theft of family assets had evolved into participation in a criminal network that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of victims. Thomas Brennan. Agent Rodriguez continued producing additional arrest warrants as the disgraced lawyer was escorted into the conference room by federal marshals. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse, professional misconduct, bribery of public officials, and operating a criminal enterprise. Brennan's silver mustache couldn't hide his ashen complexion as he realized that decades of systematic fraud had finally caught up with him. His law license, his reputation, and his freedom were disappearing simultaneously as federal agents documented his criminal activities with methodical precision. Dr. Franklin Pierce has already provided detailed testimony about the psychiatric commitment conspiracy, Agent Walsh explained, reading from her official notes. His cooperation agreement includes complete disclosure of all participants in the scheme to falsely institutionalize Lori Westbrook. Jessica gasped as she realized her husband's employment at the psychiatric facility had made him a crucial witness to the entire plot. His recordings of planning meetings and documentary evidence of falsified medical records were providing prosecutors with irrefutable proof of criminal conspiracy. Christopher Walsh, representing Titan Industries, has been cooperating with federal investigators for over 6 months. Agent Rodriguez revealed, explaining the sting operation that had allowed the property sale negotiations to proceed while gathering evidence. His recordings include admissions of environmental fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit industrial pollution crimes. The fake property developer had been wearing recording equipment during every meeting with the family, capturing Robert's eager cooperation with plans to defraud both his relatives and environmental protection agencies. Walsh's testimony would support federal charges related to environmental crimes, corporate fraud, and systematic corruption of public officials. Vincent Calabresi and his Loan Shark organization are facing federal racketeering charges based partly on evidence provided by Robert Westbrook's gambling records. Agent Walsh continued, explaining how the investigation had expanded to encompass organized crime connections. Their threats against your family constituted extortion and conspiracy to commit violence. The dangerous men who had threatened the family's safety were actually part of a criminal enterprise under federal investigation for decades of illegal lending, money laundering, and violent debt collection. Robert's cooperation would help prosecutors dismantle an organization that had terrorized thousands of victims across the eastern United States. Federal asset forfeiture procedures are already in motion. Agent Rodriguez announced producing court orders that would freeze and seize property purchased with stolen money. Every dollar stolen from family trust funds will be recovered and returned to legitimate ownership. Jessica's luxury car dealership, built with Robert's embezzled money, faced immediate closure as federal agents seized business assets and customer records. Marcus's cryptocurrency investments, funded entirely by stolen trust funds, were frozen pending legal proceedings that would determine restitution requirements. State and federal prosecutors are coordinating charges to ensure maximum sentences. Agent Walsh explained, reviewing criminal statutes that would keep Robert and Brennan in prison for decades. Elder abuse convictions carry mandatory minimum sentences, while racketeering charges add additional years. Derek sobbed as he realized his participation in sabotaging my career constituted civil rights violations that could result in federal criminal charges. His position with the school district was terminated immediately as investigators reviewed his misuse of administrative access to harm my employment prospects. VET's Environmental Protection Agency investigators are filing separate charges related to conspiracy to violate federal pollution laws. Agent Rodriguez added, explaining how Titan's attempted environmental crimes had triggered additional federal involvement. Corporate executives face criminal liability for planned ecosystem destruction. The scope of federal charges encompassed every aspect of the conspiracy against our family and the environment, from Robert's gambling-fueled embezzlement to Titan's planned industrial pollution. Every criminal act would be prosecuted to the full extent of federal law. Cooperation agreements are available for family members who provide substantial assistance to ongoing investigations. Agent Walsh offered explaining plea bargain opportunities for relatives who demonstrated genuine remorse and willingness to help prosecutors. Truthful testimony and complete restitution can result in reduced charges. As federal agents completed their arrests and began executing search warrants throughout the compound, I watched my family face the consequences of years spent prioritizing wealth over integrity. Their comfortable lives built on systematic cruelty and criminal behavior were being dismantled with the same methodical precision they had used to destroy my opportunities. The investigation Dorothy had initiated through her cooperation with federal authorities was finally reaching its conclusion, delivering justice, not just for our family, but for dozens of other victims who had suffered similar abuse. Her courage in becoming a confidential informant had made it possible to expose and prosecute a criminal enterprise that might otherwise have continued operating indefinitely. Justice was being served with the mathematical precision of federal law enforcement, but the true test of character would come in deciding how to use the power Dorothy's legacy had given me. 6 weeks after the arrest, I received an unexpected phone call from Jessica that would begin the most surprising chapter of our family's story. Her voice, stripped of its usual arrogance, carried genuine humility as she asked if we could meet privately to discuss something important. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, far from the compound, where so much pain and betrayal had unfolded. Jessica arrived wearing simple clothes instead of her usual designer outfits, her appearance reflecting the financial reality that had replaced her previous luxury lifestyle. Federal asset seizure had claimed her waterfront mansion, expensive cars, and business assets, leaving her dependent on a part-time retail job to pay for basic necessities. "I owe you an apology that words can't adequately express," Jessica began, her voice breaking with emotion I had never seen her display before. "My jealousy of your relationship with Grandma Dorothy poisoned my judgment and turned me into someone I'm ashamed to remember." The confession poured out like water through a broken dam. Jessica admitted that her cruelty toward me had stemmed from her own desperate need for Dorothy's approval, which she had never received despite years of attempted manipulation through expensive gifts and false displays of affection. She had resented my genuine connection with our grandmother while being unable to understand why her materialistic approach failed to earn similar love. Grandma saw through my act from the beginning. Jessica continued, tears streaming down her face. She knew I cared more about inheritance money than family relationships, and she was right. Over the following weeks, other family members reached out with similar requests for private conversations. Marcus, his cryptocurrency fortune destroyed by federal asset forfeiture, had taken a job teaching computer skills at a community center, serving low-income families. The work paid a fraction of his previous earnings, but provided something his investments never had: genuine satisfaction from helping others. Working with kids who have nothing has taught me what really matters, Marcus explained during our meeting at the park where we used to play as children. These students appreciate education in ways I never understood when money was my only focus. Derek's transformation was perhaps the most profound. After losing his school district position due to his sabotage of my career, he had spent weeks in deep depression before deciding to pursue teacher certification himself. The process of studying education theory and child development had opened his eyes to the damage his actions had caused. I destroyed opportunities for someone whose only crime was caring about children's futures. Derek said, his voice heavy with shame. Becoming a teacher myself feels like the only way to begin making amends for that betrayal. Amanda's change was equally dramatic. Her social media influence, built on showcasing luxury lifestyle funded by stolen money, had collapsed when federal investigations revealed the source of her wealth. Instead of seeking new ways to monetize online attention, she had begun volunteering with environmental education programs for elementary school children. Teaching kids about protecting nature gives my life meaning that posting luxury vacation photos never did, Amanda explained, showing me pictures from recent field trips to local nature preserves. These children understand instinctively that the environment needs protection. Even Patricia, Uncle Robert's wife, had undergone genuine transformation. Her comfortable role as a wealthy socialite had ended with Robert's imprisonment and their asset seizure, forcing her to confront the emptiness of relationships built on financial status rather than authentic connection. I spent years spreading rumors about your mental health because I was terrified of losing money I hadn't earned, Patricia admitted during an emotional conversation at Dorothy's gravesite. Your grandmother tried to teach me about values beyond wealth, but I was too afraid to listen. The family members who demonstrated genuine change began volunteering together at local environmental organizations. Their shared commitment to conservation work, creating authentic bonds that replaced their previous relationships based on greed and competition. They attended financial counseling sessions, participated in therapy groups for families affected by addiction, and slowly rebuilt their lives around service rather than accumulation. Working together on environmental projects has taught us how to be a real family, Derek observed as we planted native trees along the coastline. We're finally supporting each other instead of competing for money. Their transformation wasn't instant or complete, but it represented genuine progress toward becoming people Dorothy would have been proud to call family. The loss of their comfortable wealth had forced them to confront the shallow values that had poisoned their relationships for decades. We spent years mocking your commitment to education and service, Jessica said as we watched sunset paint the ocean in brilliant colors. Now we understand that you were living the values Grandma tried to teach us all. The family's financial counseling sessions revealed how thoroughly Robert's theft had supported their lifestyles beyond what their actual earnings could sustain. Learning to live within their means required developing new relationships with money based on reality rather than entitlement. Discovering that our comfortable lives were built on stolen money was devastating, Marcus admitted. But learning to find satisfaction in honest work has been liberating in ways I never expected. As autumn turned to winter, the transformed family members began discussing possibilities for participating in Dorothy's environmental legacy through meaningful work rather than simply inherited wealth. Their conversations focused on contribution and stewardship rather than personal benefit, representing a fundamental shift in values that opened pathways to redemption. Well, we want to earn the right to be part of Grandma Dorothy's vision, Amanda said, speaking for the group during a family meeting, very different from our previous gatherings. Not because we deserve forgiveness, but because the work itself is important enough to dedicate our lives to. 1 year after the arrests that changed everything, I stood on the wooden deck of what was now officially called the Dorothy Westbrook Environmental Education Center, watching busloads of excited children arrive for their first marine biology field trip. The transformed family compound buzzed with purposeful activity as staff members prepared interactive exhibits, research equipment, and educational programs that would inspire the next generation of environmental stewards. The center's mission extended far beyond simple nature appreciation to comprehensive environmental science education that connected local ecosystems to global conservation challenges. Students from elementary through high school participated in hands-on research projects, learned sustainable living practices, and developed deep emotional connections to the natural world Dorothy had worked so hard to protect. Jessica managed the center's operations with meticulous attention to detail that had previously been directed toward luxury car sales, but now served environmental education. Her transformation from materialistic businesswoman to dedicated nonprofit administrator demonstrated the power of purposeful work to reshape character and values. Today's groups include fourth graders studying water quality, middle schoolers monitoring bird migration patterns, and high schoolers analyzing the impact of climate change on local marine ecosystems. Jessica reported, her voice carrying enthusiasm that surpassed anything I had heard during her previous celebrations of financial success. Marcus had developed sustainable technology demonstrations that showed students practical applications of environmental science in their daily lives. Solar panels, wind turbines, composting systems, and water filtration technologies provided tangible examples of how scientific knowledge could solve real-world problems. These kids understand technology intuitively. Marcus explained, watching a group of 6th graders program sensors to monitor ocean temperature changes. When they see how technology can protect the environment, it clicks in ways that purely theoretical education never could. Derek's transition from school district administration to hands-on environmental education had revealed teaching talents he never knew he possessed. His programs connecting coastal ecology to classroom curriculum were being adopted by school districts throughout the region, expanding the center's impact far beyond our immediate community. By working directly with students reminds me why education matters. Derek said, helping a class of 3rd graders identify different types of seashells along the shoreline. These children will grow up understanding their responsibility to protect the environment for future generations. Amanda coordinated community outreach programs that brought environmental education to underserved populations who couldn't afford field trip costs. Her previous social media skills had been redirected toward creating educational content that reached thousands of families with conservation messages and practical sustainability tips. Environmental protection can't be a privilege for wealthy families, Amanda explained, reviewing registration data that showed the center's programs reaching children from diverse economic backgrounds. Everyone deserves access to nature education and conservation opportunities. Even Patricia had found meaningful purpose in developing programs for senior citizens interested in environmental volunteering. Her experience with social organizations had proven valuable for creating intergenerational learning opportunities. where older adults shared knowledge with young students while learning about modern conservation science. Bringing together different age groups creates rich educational experiences. Patricia observed watching retired professionals work alongside elementary students to monitor water quality in nearby streams. Everyone learns from each other in ways that pure classroom instruction couldn't achieve. The mineral rights Dorothy's geological surveys had revealed were being developed through partnerships with ethical extraction companies committed to sustainable mining practices. The revenue funded the center's operations while demonstrating that environmental protection and economic development could coexist when guided by proper values. Sustainable lithium extraction supports electric vehicle battery production while maintaining ecosystem integrity, explained Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had joined the center's board of directors. Dorothy's vision of profitable conservation is becoming a model for environmental organizations worldwide. The center's research programs attracted university partnerships that brought graduate students and faculty researchers to conduct long-term ecological studies. Their work contributed to peer-reviewed scientific publications that enhanced understanding of coastal ecosystem management and climate change adaptation strategies. Academic research partnerships ensure that our conservation work is based on the best available science. Professor David Chen noted reviewing data from ongoing studies of marine biodiversity. Dorothy would be proud that her property is advancing environmental science as well as education. As the afternoon sun painted the restored coastline in golden light, I reflected on the profound transformation that had occurred since that painful family meeting 1 year ago. The compound that had once hosted greedy relatives calculating inheritance shares now welcomed thousands of children annually to learn about environmental stewardship and scientific discovery. The family members who had once mocked my commitment to education were now dedicating their lives to teaching others about conservation. Their transformation from materialistic individuals to passionate environmental educators demonstrated that redemption was possible when people discovered purposes larger than personal wealth. We've created something that will outlast all of our individual lives, I said to the gathered staff as we watched the last school bus disappear into the evening twilight. Dorothy's legacy isn't just about protecting this property, but about inspiring countless people to become environmental stewards themselves. The Dorothy Westbrook Environmental Education Center represented triumph over the greed and betrayal that had nearly destroyed our family. By choosing rehabilitation over revenge, we had built something meaningful from the wreckage of criminal behavior and broken relationships. Uncle Robert's letters from federal prison expressed genuine remorse for his crimes and pride in the center's success. His gambling addiction treatment and financial crimes counseling had helped him understand the devastating impact of his choices, while our family's transformation gave him hope for eventual redemption. The center proves that people can change when they find purposes worthy of their efforts. I concluded reading Dorothy's words from the dedication plaque that welcomed visitors to the property. True wealth comes from building something that benefits others, not from accumulating possessions that benefit only ourselves. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky above the protected coastline, I understood that Dorothy's greatest gift wasn't the property, the mineral rights, or even the evidence that brought justice for her crimes. Her true legacy was the opportunity to choose compassion over revenge, building something meaningful that would inspire environmental stewardship for generations to come. The sound of waves against the shoreline reminded me that some things are worth protecting regardless of their financial value. Dorothy had entrusted me with that responsibility, and the thriving Environmental Education Center proved that her faith in my character had been well placed. Have you ever discovered that someone close to you was living a completely different life than what they showed you? How did learning the truth change your relationship with them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales about family secrets, justice, and the power of choosing forgiveness over revenge. Share this story with others who might need to hear that. It's never too late to transform your life around values that truly matter. Thank you for joining me on this journey through betrayal discovery and ultimately redemption. I hope Dorothy's legacy inspires you to think about what kind of inheritance you want to leave for future generations. And remember that the most valuable things we can pass on aren't measured in dollars, but in the positive impact we have on the world around us. Until next time, may your choices be guided by compassion rather than greed, and may you find the courage to protect what truly matters, even when it requires great personal sacrifice.